After years of scandals, destroyed lives, and cover-ups, the latest grooming gang inquiry was supposed to finally deliver truth and justice. Instead, it has become another expensive exercise in avoiding responsibility, protecting institutions and allowing grifters to profit from other people's suffering, and in doing so, be able to buy them a coffee or able to get some shekels. This inquiry has failed on almost every level. Britain has had multiple inquiries into grooming gangs. Each time the same problems are identified: political correctness, fear of racism accusations, and authorities failing to protect vulnerable girls. The latest inquiry was meant to be different. It was supposed to uncover new evidence and support victims. Instead, it has nothing new, turning away some alleged victims and allowing people with no real connection to the suffering to use it for personal branding and grifting. In today's video, we're exposing exactly why this inquiry was always going to be a flop. If Restore Britain was serious about this issue, they should have brought in proper professionals with experience in investigations and victim support. Instead, they allowed amateurs and media figures to take the centre stage. This lack of professionalism has damaged the credibility of the entire effort and made it easier for critics to dismiss the whole thing, especially with the CPS and throwing out the case, since in private prosecutions they can actually do this, and most of the time when it is handled to the CPS, even with something serious, they throw it out of the court case, as I said previously. Serious issues like grooming gangs require serious people, not political operators looking for attention. One of the most shameful aspects of this inquiry is that it produced no meaningful new evidence. When you're trying to look for evidence, you make sure that you're trying to look for anything new, such as, like I said, with victims, and evidence such as maybe people were trafficked to hotels, and vice versa. Even worse, some people who came forward as alleged victims were turned away. This is deeply damaging to real victims of grooming gangs. When genuine survivors see others being dismissed or ignored, it makes them less likely to come forward. The inquiry has managed to hurt the very people it claimed to want to help. Grifters such as someone like with Donna Rachel, though some people would argue that she's trying to do some good compared to this inquiry, Donna Rachel has used this issue to position herself as some kind of expert while making a mockery of the victims. Though she didn't directly insult the victims, although she did laugh at the inquiry that was happening by Restore, not by the actual victims and laughing at them like that in that context. While some of her points about unprofessionalism in previous inquiries had merit, her overall approach has been self-serving and exploitative. She turned real suffering into content and personal branding rather than focusing on delivering justice. This kind of behaviour is disgraceful and damages the cause. A lot of the time, and on her social media, such as her Twitter account, including that funny picture she did of herself, it also proved that she was basically just using this in order to gain some money. And people will argue that she was just trying to, in quotes, try to basically pay £5 for this inquiry in order for people to actually make serious claims in this inquiry. Making people pay will obviously stop the trolls, in case that someone tries to exploit this or even lie in cases. Especially with that one woman who apparently was trying to, in quote, trying to say that she was trafficked or groomed, even though that her alibi and that where she was didn't really match what she was trying to say, and that she was, in quote, like I said, groomed. But someone like with Donna Rachel tried to grift in and get all the money of people with charging people money, and then basically doing nothing with the money. Now, maybe she's not a liar herself, but obviously she had good intentions, but when it comes down to someone like this, and especially someone of her heritage, it wouldn't surprise me that she was just using this in order to grift. The people running this inquiry have offered almost no practical support to the actual victims. There has been very little focus on helping survivors with counselling, compensation, or long-term care. Instead, the focus has been on media appearances and political point scoring. Real inquiries into these scandals should put the victims first. This one has done the opposite. It is worth remembering that Marlene Guest and the BNP were raising the grooming gang issue properly over a decade ago. They produced detailed reports and highlighted the ethnic and cultural problems and patterns long before it became fashionable, such as someone like Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, or even Nick Griffin, or someone like with Mark Curley, have not raised this issue even before someone like this with Marlene Guest, who should have all of the credit, especially all the work that she did. Their work was more than thorough and honest that much of what is being produced now, the fact that the mainstream figures are only now catching up shows how badly the establishment failed for years, especially to do with the CPS, the social services, especially being all very disorganised, and especially to do with all the police, in quote, even being involved and allowing all of this abuse to happen, whether they're paid off or have an in-group preference, which some of these people racially actually do, and especially to do with all of these gangs that were involved. And especially because people said it was majority Pakistani, when it actually wasn't. In fact, they said it was around somewhere like 78% or 87% Pakistani, when there were also Sikhs involved with this. Because if they have an in-group preference, it makes it easy to spot the crime. And as well, it's not just so when people call you racist, they can just play the race card. So the fact that they're allowed to do this, and as well the fact that if they have this, it makes it very easy for people to be trafficked. Tommy Robinson, Nick Griffin, Nigel Farage, Ben Habib, and Rupert Lowe have all used this grooming gang scandal to build their personal brands. While some of them have done important work highlighting the issue, many have also exploited it for clicks, donations, and political gain. The suffering of thousands of girls has been turned into content and fundraising opportunities. This exploitation is cynical and damages trust in anyone trying to address the issue seriously. This inquiry has failed the victims twice, once by not delivering justice, and again by allowing these grifters to profit for their plan. While political figures treat grooming gang victims as props for their own careers, it shows they were never serious about justice in the first place. So anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this video about me talking about the grooming gang inquiry, and again, I know what people are going to say and go on a rant at me and say that, oh, what have you done about this grooming gang inquiry? Well, a lot of people would say that this has good intentions, like I said, what happened with the Makerfield video that I did previously. But when it comes down to all of these people, bandwagoning and virtue signalling, quite similar to what the left do with allowing refugees and saying they're, in quote, welcome, this is just another scandal or being able to help them promote themselves more online. Showing that these politicians, in quote, really care about us, when, in fact, in reality, they actually don't. They just want to use us for political gain in order for them to look good, and then when they get in power, they'll do absolutely fuck all about it. And especially with Lowe, which, again, when I actually tried to read this report, I couldn't find any new victims, and apparently there was like, well, actually found like 250,000 girls were, which I don't think it'll be that much or little, because some people say it was in the millions, like someone like with Tommy Robinson allegedly, which I don't think it was in the millions, but I don't think it was in 250,000 or 250,000. And the reason why I think this is because, again, when I was reading, like, with Summer of Crime Bodge, again, I keep bringing it up when I talk about the UK law, but when it comes down to actually being able to gather evidence, and especially that Donna Rachel, the Jewish woman, where she said that, county lines aren't phone lines, which, again, I'll have to defend Restore here and say that basically that those lines, or county lines, or whatever the fuck she said, where what they actually meant in that report was that basically these people were using county lines. So, for example, let's say East Midlands to somewhere like London, or maybe somewhere like East Midlands, West Midlands, somewhere along those lines. Those are county lines, and that's what they meant in the report. And because of this cherry picking that this Donna Rachel has actually done, she's basically just become turned into basically a female happy merchant. And because of this, when someone like this has good intentions, like, when they're going and trafficking people with county lines, obviously if they're imported in the country, and as well when it comes down to demographically changed areas, especially where they're, obviously having a good preference, so maybe they're Pakistani, or maybe they're Gypsy or Roma people, where basically they're, in some reports there were actually some Gypsies, there were some Sikhs as well, and when they have a good preference and they know that they can, move women about, and obviously this isn't one individual case where there were all of these people that were just, and obviously the majority of them were groomed, especially were actually white. But there were other people that were allegedly turned away by this inquiry when it comes down to, especially, there was this one woman who was like Sikh, there was one woman that was mixed race, and then there was one that was Muslim that apparently were turned away because it didn't, in quote, fit the narrative. And I think Rupert Lowe being the head of this is a very big mistake because, again, it shouldn't be a part of Rupert Lowe, it should be him funding it, and then basically having all of that money being poured into it, making sure that it's done professionally. But the problem is, and the massive issues where if something like on this massive scale would take years and millions of pounds to actually get through properly. Have proper evidence, have been able to take this to CPS and make sure that they don't throw this out, which in most cases they do. And especially when someone's in grooms, where I've actually helped someone like with advice on what to do, especially victim support, if they've been raped or they've been SA'd. And basically, if you try to get enough evidence, but most of the time, if you do a private prosecution, which essentially you have to give your case to the CPS, majority of the time will throw it out, which, that's something like with CPS because of lack of evidence, and they'll just make an excuse up. And maybe one day that we could actually go to the High Court and actually have this changed, so that way people can make it a lot easier to actually convict these people who were especially so involved in something like with the grooming gangs. And because of this inquiry that wasn't done professionally, we didn't, like I said, learn anything new, at least when I actually read the report. It's very frustrating that these people and these politicians are just using virtue signaling, where they're basically just using the victims in order to boost their profile, especially with someone like Rupert Lowe. So, like I said, this report should have been done properly, should have had proper lawyers and proper solicitors or whatever, and make sure that all the evidence is done. And the problem, another problem that I actually have for this inquiry is that they didn't really have like an objective. Now, it wanted to investigate the grooming gangs, but which grooming gangs? The Pakistani ones, the Sikh ones, the white ones, the Roma ones, etc. And doing the sex trafficking and slavery, or modern slavery, and these women being bought off on like markets. But the problem is that I don't think that it had that intent of the aim. So they just wanted to find out something about these gangs or something. It was very vague definition of what it was, because they didn't set out what the aims were. They could have had aims where it could have been find new evidence, find new victims, regardless of their background, and then look at the financial or even the institutional failure. Because like I said, with someone like Crime Bodge, if you try and actually get the police to do their job, it's very frustrating, because when it comes down to actually trying to get them to do their job, or you give them evidence, they can lose the report. And in fact, apparently some of them were actually chucked in a bin. And because of all this frustration, it really shows that the system, and you're actually trying to do good. For some reason, we're living in an anarchist tyranny state where basically, where everything that you do good is bad, and basically anyone who's a criminal is virtually allowed to go free. Even if you give the police evidence, they'll probably just chuck it in a bin. And because of this, like I said before, with the institutional failures, it makes it very frustrating where you actually want the police to do their job and they're not doing it because maybe the police have gone woke and they're lefty if you're white. For example, what will happen with Henry Newark, you basically will just end up losing your life. Even if you could have been saved, or even if you were saved and then ended up dying off later, they basically, if you're black, brown or yellow, they basically save your life. And because of this, and why the police need to be apolitical, especially if you are trying to investigate a grooming gang, make sure that you actually find out enough evidence. And as well, if you want to click on the link in the description, the link to my other channels and Discord as well.